Hello. Now today's story is another Shirley Hughes story, and it's another one about Alfie. I do love the Alfie stories. I hope you're enjoying them. This one's called An Evening at Alfie's. And his mum and dad are going out for the evening, so he has a babysitter. And it gets all quite exciting. Let's begin. One cold winter evening, Alfie and his little sister Annie Rose were all ready for bed. They're both in their pyjamas, aren't they? Alfie's got his elephant and his blanket. And look down on the floor, he's been playing with his toy, and it's Noah's Ark. You might have heard of that story about a great big flood. Mum and Dad were all ready to go out. She's just putting on her lipstick there. And Mrs. McNally's Maureen was in the living room. She had come to look after Alfie and Annie Rose while Mum and Dad went to a party. Alfie and Maureen waved goodbye to them from the window. Annie Rose was already in her cot. Soon she settled down and went to sleep. Little brothers and sisters need a lot more sleep, don't they? So they have to have a slightly earlier bedtime than children as big as Alfie. Alfie liked Maureen. She always read him a story when she came to babysit. Tonight, Alfie wanted the story about Noah and his ark full of animals. Alfie liked to hear how the rain came drip, 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 and then splash, 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 and then rushing everywhere until the whole world was covered with water. When Maureen had finished the story, it was time for Alfie to go to bed. She came upstairs to tuck him up. They had to be very quiet and talk in whispers in case they woke up Annie Rose. She's in the cot next to them, so they've got to be very quiet in the bedroom. Maureen gave Alfie a good night hug and she went off downstairs, leaving the door a little bit open. That must help him feel a bit braver. But Alfie didn't feel sleepy. Does that happen to you sometimes? He lay in bed, looking at the patch of light on his ceiling. For a long time, all was quiet. Then he heard a funny noise outside on the landing. Wonder what that might be. Alfie sat up. The noise was just outside his door. Drip, drip, drip. Soon it got quicker. It changed to drip, 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 drip. It was getting louder too. Alfie got out of bed and peeped round the door. There was a puddle on the floor. He looked up. Water was splashing into the puddle from the ceiling. Drip, 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 drip. It was raining inside the house. Alfie went downstairs. That's a very sensible thing to do, isn't it? Go and let somebody know. Maureen was doing her homework in front of the television. It's raining on the landing, Alfie told her. Alfie and Maureen went back upstairs. The puddle was getting bigger and bigger. The drip, 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 drip had turned into a splash, splash, splash. Looks like a burst pipe, said Maureen. A plumber was one of the things she'd wanted to be when she left school. Better get a bucket, she said. So Alfie showed her where the bucket was kept, in the kitchen cupboard with the brushes and brooms. How good that Alfie knew where to find things. But now the water was dripping down in another place. Alfie and Maureen found 2 of Mum's big mixing bowls and put them underneath the drips. "Oh, look at the landing, it's full of water." Maureen got on the telephone to her mum. That's a really good idea, isn't it? The McNallys lived just across the street. Mrs. McNally was there in a moment. "Oh dear, it's ruining your mother's floor," cried Mrs. McNally. "Fetch some floor cloths, Maureen." Just then Annie Rose woke up and began to cry. "Shh, shh, there," said Mrs. McNally, bending over her cot. But Annie Rose only looked at her and cried louder. Mrs. McNally ran back to the landing. She and Maureen tried to mop up the water, but now the drips were coming from lots of different places. Splash, splash, splash. "We ought to turn the water off from the main," said Maureen, "but I don't know how you do it. I think I'd better fetch Dad." While she was gone, Mrs. McNally mopped and emptied brimming bowls, and in between mopping and emptying, she ran to try to comfort Annie Rose. But Annie Rose went on crying and crying. The drips on the landing came faster and faster. Now there were lots of puddles on the floor. Alfie paddled in them for a while. It was quite fun, but the water was very cold. Where do you think it's coming from? He thought that soon perhaps the whole street would be covered with water and they would all have to float away in a boat like in Noah's Ark. Alfie's got a very good imagination. Soon Maureen came running upstairs with Mr. McNally close behind her. He was wearing his bedroom slippers still. "What's all this then?" said Mr. McNally, looking at all the water pouring down. He put his head round the bedroom door. He and Annie Rose were old friends. Dear, what's all this?" he said in a very kind voice. Then he went downstairs and he found a large sort of tap under the stairs and turned it off, just like that. "So that's where it was," said Maureen. Every house has a big tap that turns the water on or off to come into the house. It's very useful if there's a big leak. Then the water stopped pouring down through the ceiling. Splash, 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 and became a drip, 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 and then a drip, 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 and then it stopped altogether. "Oh, thank goodness for that," said Mrs. McNally. She looks quite worn out. "I'll know how to do it next time," said Maureen. But Annie Rose was still crying. Oh dear, she's very upset, isn't she? Alfie went into the bedroom to see if he could cheer her up. Tears were rolling down her cheeks and soaking into her blanket. Oh dear. "Don't cry, Annie Rose," said Alfie, and he put his hand through the bars of her cot and he patted her very gently as he'd seen Mum do sometimes. Annie Rose still wore nappies at night. "Annie Rose is wet," Alfie told everyone, "and her bed's wet too. I expect that's why she's crying." "Why, so she is, poor little mite," said Mrs. McNally. "Well done, Alfie." When Annie Rose was all dry and comfortable again, Mrs. McNally put her on the living room sofa with Alfie and tucked a quilt round them. Then she gave them both a biscuit. Oh, they look so cosy, and Annie Rose looks so much happier, doesn't she? Now she's all dry again. Annie Rose was very cheerful now. She got very friendly with Mr. McNally, and he let her play a game with him, taking off his glasses and putting them on again. Then she sucked her thumb and leaned up against Alfie, and Alfie leaned up against her. When Mum and Dad came home, they were both fast asleep. They look very snug, don't they? And what an adventure they've had. Next morning, Mum told Alfie not to turn on the taps until the plumber had been to mend the burst pipe. Alfie didn't mind not having a wash. He'd had enough water the evening before to last for a long time. I hope you've enjoyed the story. Now, some of you may have spotted that I have a little treat here. Shall we see where he is? Hello. Are you sleepy? Would you like a little treat? Oh, you just woke up? Good boy. Good boy.